Book of Acts. All right, so before I get into the message, so yesterday we're going to load up some sermons from a couple previous weeks. We don't have last week's sermon. We didn't get that. You always like to have a message. The one you'd like to have, you don't get. So we didn't get last week's message. Technical difficulty. But anyway, so we went to load them up yesterday. So I set my alarm to remind me to load up previous sermons yesterday at 5. And the power went out. Somebody decided to take on the telephone pole about a half mile down the road. So they took out our power. So we were without power for a few hours. Anyway, so it kind of messed up the evening. Except my bedtime. I still went to bed at 10 o'clock. Anyway. Getting prepared for tonight when I have to stay up till about 11 because of the basketball game. Which, is anybody watching basketball who doesn't watch basketball? I'm just curious, just surprised because, it's kind of a big series and I won't tell you why, but because you don't care, obviously, or you'd be watching it, right? But it's got a storyline. I mean, so that's why I asked. And of course, I was trying to tell Carol, and she says, well, show me who he is. And I'm not going to tell you who he is, because if you're not interested, well, you don't care who he is, all right? So I told Carol, well, there he is, right? That's who he is right there. Well, what number is he? I couldn't remember at the moment. I don't know, but there he is. I can tell by looking at him on the court. Anyway. And you wouldn't care what number he was because you're not interested. So I'm not going to tell you what number he wears. You have to watch the game tonight to find out. Who's he talking about? You have to turn to... Anyway. All right. See, you don't know who I'm talking about. And some of you, that bothers you. It's like, well... Okay, now I've lost you for the next 40 minutes, haven't I? Okay, well, let's try this. We're in the book of Acts. Okay, so we said, just like when we get done, you will have a pretty good grasp on the book of Acts. Of course, you'd have to be here every week, or you'd have to watch the videos later online, except for last week's, which is not going to be online. But so Acts chapter 1, do you remember? And really, wouldn't it be nice if you could just kind of have it? You know what I mean? Like Acts chapter 1, that's Jesus reiterates the Great Commission, ascends up into heaven, and then the disciples go to the upper room. Okay, that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, the biggest, perhaps, chapter, maybe chapter 9 where we are today, but we have Pentecost, and we have the beginning of the church. Well, then, after that, we get to chapter 3, and Peter and John heal this guy, remember? I mean, he's like 40 years old. They heal him, causes problems. So in chapter 4, they have to go to jail. They get thrown in jail, and then they witness, and that's always a big thing. Chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira and their hypocrisy. Well, then there's more jail time for the disciples, and then we have Gamaliel, who says, we all just kind of take it easy on these guys. And then chapter 6, people start serving in the church, and the church explodes. Chapter 7, Stephen is stoned for his witnessing. First martyr. Acts 8, the last couple of weeks, we've talked about Philip. He witnessed in Samaria, left there, and met an Ethiopian eunuch. And now we're in Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9. And it's like, okay, let's come up with a really good title. So here's what it is. The Conversion of Saul. That's my title. No creativity. I really can't improve on that. What a great story. So let's look at it. Bible stories about human beings. Just like us. Of course, I know, and as I've said before, we tend to read the Bible, look at the story, look at the character, and then we put a great gulf between us, as if we're very different, and yet we're not. I mean, I know Moses had the burning bush, and I know Adam walked with God, and I know David killed Goliath, but Paul reminds us because the crowd was elevating him in Acts chapter 14, and he says, whoa, 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 we're just like y'all. Now, we had a phrase for that. Well, he puts on his pants just like you put your pants on. I mean, that's kind of what, that was an old American phrase, all right? So that's what Paul's saying. I mean, yeah, he had his unique experiences, but you've got your unique experiences. You really do. And at some point, I think what happens is we quit reading our Bibles. So we read stuff on the internet, or we pick up our favorite novel, and we read those with intensity. And then part of that, I guess, is due because the Bible's just it's kind of old, more of a relic. And yet we're reminded in Hebrews 4:15 that Jesus can identify with our daily temptations. So we got to put ourselves in the Bible as well as others. And I mean, what would you have done if you'd been standing by the burning bush? I mean, think about it. Nobody else had a burning bush experience. All of a sudden, a bush starts to burn. Middle of the desert. No lightning. I mean, it just starts burning. Would you have run away? No. And then God spoke to Moses. Pretty interesting. But you know, most of us get up and go through life, and we're not expecting a burning bush. Now, the bush might not burn, but we just don't figure God's going to show up at all. In the movie Gandhi, there's a scene set, I think it's near the end of the movie. It's in South Africa, and an Indian lawyer and a white clergyman are walking together, which was against the law at that particular time in South Africa. And then they were approached by some white guys, kind of brutish looking, that looked like they wanted to do them some harm. Well, the mother of one of the white guys yelled out the window and said, hey, go on, mind your own business. And then they walked on, the Indian lawyer and the white clergy guy, and the white clergy guy says, wow, talking about good luck. And then Gandhi comments, I thought you were a man of God. And the clergyman replied, well, I am, but I don't believe he plans his day around me. I want you to think about that. You don't believe that God plans his day around you? That's how many of us think. And we don't believe that he guides, that he shows up, burning bush, just whatever. But isn't God's greatness reason enough to believe that he's not too busy with the big things of the world? Even the smaller things? Did you get up today thinking, I wonder if God's thought about my day? He thought about your day while you were still sleeping. So today, we're going to look at the conversion of Saul. But I want to remind you that when God sent his son, he did that to remind us that we are important enough that he wants to be involved in our lives. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've met Saul. We saw him. We first met him when Stephen was stoned, and he cast his vote in favor of them stoning him. So we want to look at his conversion to Christianity. Luke tells the story 3 times. That's a big deal. I mean, this is a big deal to Luke. Now, let me remind you. You hear a lot of teaching about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Every Easter, it's about the resurrection. But did you know that the conversion of Saul, I don't know if I could say this is a fact, but you might as well call it that. The conversion of Saul is the second biggest event in Christianity, in the history of Christianity. In fact, people have long said that if you could disprove the resurrection and the conversion of Saul, then Christianity would crumble. Those two events. In fact, at one point in time, and you can still buy the books today written years ago in the 18th century, two guys set out to disprove Christianity. So they got together and they said, tell you what, you take the resurrection, I'll take the conversion of Saul. So they set out, did their investigative work, got back to meet, and guess what one of them said? I kind of felt bad. He had a confession to make, and he said, well, as I researched and studied, I found out the resurrection is true. And the other guy says, wow, I'm glad you said that, because as I studied the conversion of Saul, I realized I couldn't disprove it. Couldn't disprove it. And they wrote books about it. Convinced that the stories were true. So the two great pillars of Christianity, the resurrection and the conversion of Saul. And that's how big a deal our text is today. Now here's the thing. How do you get to know Paul? We weren't there, like Luke and Timothy, who knew him personally. So let me just throw a few names out to help us get a composite of what Paul was like. Like if there's a crime, sometimes they take the evidence, they draw these sketches, and you get an idea of what the guy looked like. So that's all I want to do. All right? Whether you like these guys or not, doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to get a composite. All right? So history tells us that he was rather short. All right? I don't know. I know Jack Welch, one of the more revered past CEOs of America, stands at 5'8". Okay? 5'8". Put him in a room of, I don't care, 50 guys, CEO, 6'5", and he stands out head and shoulders above the crowd. All right? So, but he's short. I mean, it didn't matter. All right? So that's the Apostle Paul. You think, man, he was a short guy. And then they say he was ugly. Now, you're short and ugly. Those aren't two things you want to be. All right? You know, take short but not ugly. I mean, anybody here want to be ugly? I mean, you just don't. Okay? And J.P. Morgan had a chronic skin disease and he had a purple nose. I mean, when you think of a purple nose, you think of a clown today. I mean, it's red, but I mean, and listen, he didn't like his picture being taken. And then all of the photographs were touched because basically he felt ugly with that purple nose. But you've heard the name J.P. Morgan. We could go back, talk about him and how that's why we have a Federal Reserve System today. We could go ahead and talk about the banking and all that. And, you know, but we're not, because I don't have time to get into all that. Didn't hold him back. And then let's talk about somebody else, because Gamaliel, who was Paul's teacher, in his writings, and we don't know for sure, but most people would believe that he's talking about Paul. But nonetheless, as you read about Paul, you know this is what he was like. So here's what he said. He said he had a student who manifesting impudence in matters of learning. Impudent. Just, you know, hard to get along with. Kind of out there. Rude, inappropriate, in class. And I thought, well, let's just help out. Now, I don't know whether you like this guy or not, but let's put in Trump's name, okay? And I'm not saying he's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever, but listen. Put all biases aside, he's rude at times, okay? I mean, he just is. He's inappropriate at times. Even absurd at times, right? I mean, look, you probably say, well, all politicians fit that. Okay, but whatever. You know, he gets the airtime. In fact, I'm watching the NBA playoffs, and they start talking about Trump during halftime. I'm like, what's he got to do with basketball? Nothing, except ratings, because people don't turn the channel. And I learned that a long time ago, because I heard a radio guy, they criticized him, how come you talk about so-and-so all the time? Because when I talk about so-and-so, you don't turn the channel. I mean, it's all about the ratings. All right? And you know, then to top it off, there's people in the Republican Party, they hate Trump. Now, I say all that because, look, we're going to get in here. Listen, the Christians didn't like Paul after his conversion. They didn't like him. Basically, they were saying, never Paul. All right? I just want you to feel the text. All right? I want you to feel the text. That's all. Now, I know we're talking about two different people. One's a politician. One has been converted to Jesus Christ. His life's about to be totally transformed. And when we read about the Apostle Paul, he's going to talk about now being gentle. This is a guy who harassed believers and put them in jail. I mean, this guy was ruthless. And early believers they didn't trust Paul. They didn't. And then Paul writes later about being humble and loving. Now, if you had known Saul before his conversion, and believers do this, we think, well, he'll never change. It's impossible. Impossible. Well, I just want you to see some of the emotions in the text. And I don't have to tell you that wherever Trump goes, there tends to be high emotions, okay? I mean, that's just kind of what it ever is. Same with Paul, all right? Now, I know we're talking about one a politician and one who becomes a follower of Christ. So it's different, but I just want you to feel the emotions. Well, Saul, that was his Jewish name. Saul was the first king of Israel. And listen, of the tribe of Benjamin, Saul, who we're talking about in the text, who's also known as the Apostle Paul. Paul was his Roman name. He also was born in the tribe of Benjamin. So his dad said, hey, we're going to name him after the first king of Israel, Saul. That's how he got his name. So we got Saul, but then his Roman name is Paul. And because he became a missionary to the Gentiles, the Roman Empire, we know him as Paul. That's what he went by. All right? And he was a Roman citizen. And his Hebrew ancestry meant a lot to him. In Philippians 3, here's what he said. Though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh also. I mean, he was an egotistical maniac, Paul was. He talks about it. If anyone else thinks he has reason for such arrogance or confidence in the flesh, I have more. And then he starts rattling off why he's so great. Or felt he was so great. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. A Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law of Pharisee. He just rattling it on. I'm top dog. Look at me. He was. And at one point in Scripture, after his conversion, boy, he's like, I was the worst. I was such a horrible sinner. Incredible. But I was blinded. I was ignorant at the time. I mean, his future was bright, highly educated, as we said, studied under Gamaliel, scrupulous in obeying the law, highly arrogant, and he walked around through life thinking he deserved God's favor. I mean, he just did. That's what he was like. I mean, but he says in Philippians 3:6, as he talks about it, his past, he says, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. Blameless. I'm reminded somebody asked Trump one time, you ever asked for forgiveness? No, I don't think so. Neither did Paul. He was blameless. I mean, you ask Paul, stop him on the street, how we doing? Doing good. I keep the law to the end. I'm good. I don't need to ask forgiveness or anything. Wow. Now, over time, did an inner dissatisfaction begin to grow? I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Was Saul's conversion a process or instantaneous? What I mean is, it happened suddenly, but was something going on the inside ahead of time? I don't know, but I'm going to come back and address that at the end for just a moment. He was there when Stephen was stoned. I wonder how much that weighed on him. We talked about the influence of Stephen on him. Surely he knew about all the unlearned uneducated Galileans making a huge difference at this point. He even noticed that priests and scholars were joining the group and converting to Christianity. So, I mean, doubts are beginning to swirl maybe. But being the impudent person that he was, he kept persecuting the church. Hardcore. But as we get to Acts chapter 9, his life's about to change and the history of the world. Now listen, while our conversions may not be as dramatic or memorable, there are features that we have in common. All right? I mean, when I got saved, there was no light from heaven. Could have been. It was 8 o'clock at night, roughly. We were on a camping retreat, and I was 17 years old, so I don't know. I guess it could have been a light. Didn't have that. But let's just talk about Saul's conversion. Number one, I'll give you the point, we'll read about it. Our conversion is initiated by God. Please, don't take the credit. Don't take the credit. Acts 9:1. But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest, asked for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way. Jesus said, I'm the way. All right, so this is just an early description. This was before they were coined Christians, and we'll learn about that later on. Called the way. Men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now, as he went on his way, he approached Damascus. Now, I just want you to understand, Paul's not looking for God. He's not seeking God. He is just out to destroy Christianity. That's his number one goal. All of a sudden, a light from heaven shone round him. Now, I want you to keep in mind, there were two huge stumbling blocks for Paul. Number one, Jews could not fathom the idea of a Messiah who would suffer, and Jesus suffered and died. And they could not even begin to think that the temple would go out of date. And when Stephen talked about those two things, they took him out. I mean, those ideas had to be stopped. And so Paul becomes a self-appointed inquisitor. And so he takes it upon himself to destroy the church and believers. And you and I know prejudices die hard. They really do. I mean, they just do. Some we still deal with. I mean, even if it's your favorite restaurant, and all of a sudden something happens, man, I think of things like places like Chipotle. Hey, how many of you no longer go to Chipotle? Anybody in here? Yeah, there's a go. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to go or not. Okay, well, it's like, it could be anything. But another reason I threw Trump's name in is because a year ago, nobody gave him a chance. And in Paul's life, from reading the text, you do not give him a chance of coming to Christ. You may be witnessing to somebody now and you don't give them a chance. And you got all the reasons. I got the reasons for Paul. Persecutor. Man, he's biased. It's the law. That's all he talks about. No way. And we can go through history. We could go back and look at Augustine. We could look at John Newton, who was a slave trader. And eventually he became a slave himself. And yet we know John Newton mostly, he was a great theologian. But we know him mostly from the song Amazing Grace. He never got over his conversion. Never got over it. Incredible. He never would have thought that he would have become a believer. And we go on and on through history. And then suddenly, it all changes. One day Paul's persecuting, the next day he's submitting to Christ. It's crazy. Oh, because the Lord took the initiative. Well, here's what happened in verse 4. There's a huge conviction of sin, and falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Wow. So, when I denigrate another believer, I'm actually denigrating Jesus Christ. Do you realize the significance of this passage right here? Jesus said, no, when you stoned Stephen, you actually, that was me. I identify so closely with my people. That's me. And Jesus talks about that in Matthew 25. You gave somebody a cup of water, you gave it to me. All right? And so when he said, Paul, you've been persecuting me, there was a huge conviction of sin. And so in number 3, there's this instantaneous submission to Christ. And he said, who are you? And who are you calling? Lord. Lord. He didn't beat around the bush. He got it. And he said, I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting. But rise, go to the city, and you'll be told what you are to do. And the men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice but seeing no one. They got left out of the conversation. So here's what happened. And we'll read about this in other texts, but I'm not going to go there yet. So Jesus spoke to him in Aramaic, which was the dialect of the day among, the Jews or the Hebrews. Greek was spoken by everybody else. And so they heard a sound, but they couldn't understand it. So they got left out of the conversation, and Jesus was talking. That's probably not the conversation you want to get left out of. Well, Saul got up off the ground, and although his eyes were open, he didn't see anything. So he's blind. So they led him by the hand and brought him to Damascus, and for 3 days he was without sight, and neither ate nor drank. What would you do for 3 days? No sight. You didn't even eat or drink. What would you do? You'd do a lot of thinking. You'd do a lot of reflecting. And you would realize how wrong you were. And during those 3 days, I'm sure he realized how desperate his soul was, and he was oblivious to it for years. And then I'm sure he began to reflect on his new commitment to Christ, but he had not yet been told all that lies ahead, but he's about to. But he's got 3 days to reflect. Well, we notice in number 4, the power of encouragement from others. So there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, now I want you to get the picture. Saul has been converted. Okay, nobody knows yet. I mean, it hadn't become really public. And so Ananias said, here I am, Lord. And the Lord said, rise up, go to the street called Straight, which still exists in Damascus today. And at the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul. Behold, he's praying. And he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come in, lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. Now, if you're Ananias, don't read ahead. Are you going? You going to see this guy? He's been putting you in jail, people like you. Are you going? And Ananias said, whoa, 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 whoa. But, Lord, I've heard a lot of stuff about this guy and how much evil he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he's got the authority to take me back and put me in jail. And the Lord said, go. Because I've chosen him to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. And I'm going to show him ahead of time how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. Now, if you're Saul, what do you need at this point in your life more than anything else? You don't even like these people. Are you with me? You haven't even liked Christians. And now you show up and you meet one and you've got to have an encounter with one. What do you need more than anything else? A good welcome. You need to know that you're going to be accepted and welcome. I mean, you got to understand, Paul's new to the church. He's never been to one of these. Look, but Ananias was there. Now, in the text, who's the hero? You don't know who the leader of one of the churches was in Damascus, do you? You don't know. We're not even told. All we know is this guy Ananias, the guy who stood at the front door, whatever. I mean, he was the welcome mat. He's the hero. I mean, he is. And we undermine the little guy so much. People do it all the time. People do it in the sports world. Nike does it. Nike? You mean the big company with the Air Jordan tennis shoes and all that? They undermine little people? Yeah. When they went to meet with Steph Curry, I mean, they got stuff wrong, got some of the copy wrong on the press and all that. You know why? Because he's 6'2". In the NBA, he's just a squirt. He's never going to do anything. We're not that worried about him. Under Armour shows up and goes all out. Now, let me tell you, which company, Nike or Under Armour, smiles all the way to the bank today to the tune of some $200 million? Because they didn't undermine the little guy. Got any idea? Under Armour. I'm telling you, we undervalue people all the time. Even professionals do it. That's what they do for a living, is to figure out who's going to make them money. It is a corporation. I tell you, we do it too because we're in a star-driven society. It's just the way it is. But Ananias was the hero. And all he did was provide a warm welcome. That's it. That's it. That's it. It wasn't glamorous. And you just can't overestimate first impressions. And so when this guy Saul showed up, you know, it's kind of like they're standing at the front door and they're like, here comes Saul. I got to go to the bathroom. You say hi to it. You got your name in the Bible. The book of Acts is written in, say the 60s. Say you were living about 75 and you're Ananias and the guy who went to the bathroom. You got your name in the Bible. All I did was welcome Paul in. That's all I did. Whoa. Whoa. And then he went on to change the world. And you're like, that's the stupidest bathroom break I ever took in my entire life. Man. And you kick yourself just like Nike. Every time you make a deposit. It could have been $200 million and still counting. Got to move on. Number 5, transformed. When you're converted, you are transformed by the Holy Spirit. So Ananias departed and entered the house, and laying his hands on him, he said, Brother Saul. You know, we don't really say that anymore, but in the earlier days, and I guess it kind of went out, we call people brother. I remember when my dad first started going to church, committed his life to Christ, and people in the church would call him brother. He hated that because when he grew up, his brothers and sisters called him brother. He just didn't like that. He didn't understand that was like Christian lingo. He started here, Brother Saul, because you're in the family now, Paul. But that's what they did. They said, Brother Saul. Anyway, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road by which you came, has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, as I said before, turned Paul's hatred into love. He was a ferocious guy. He became very gentle. A guy who was restless became a guy filled with peace. And from a single-minded quest of harassing believers to a single-minded quest of beholding the delightfulness of the Lord. Psalm 27:4. There's an old hymn we used to sing, turn your eyes upon Jesus and look into his wonderful face. We forget that Jesus is so completely sufficient for every need. Well, number 6, he got baptized. So he got converted. 3 days later, he gets baptized. I was converted on a Saturday night. I got baptized on a Sunday morning. So that's what people do. They get baptized following their conversion. And then number 7, he gets connected to a local church. And so taking food, he was strengthened. And for some days, he was with the disciples at Damascus. I don't know what all they talked about. They probably shared their conversion experiences. I mean, they weren't like Paul's. But everybody, and listen, everybody's going to be different. Carol was saved when she was like 5. My IQ wasn't high enough at the age of 5 to even have a clue what it was all about. You know what I mean? But anyway, I was 17. I'm a slow learner. But anyway, and so we have 2 different stories, and mine's much more vivid than Carol's. She couldn't really tell you. Well, let me wrap up with a couple of thoughts about his conversion and anybody else's. Acts 26:14, and when we had all fallen to the ground, this is the 3rd account of Paul's conversion in the book of Acts, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, or Aramaic, very similar, but it was the Aramaic tongue, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's hard for you to kick against the goads. So here we have a picture of a young wild animal being broken. And you just kick them or whatever you do. All right? Now in life, for the Apostle Paul, while he was persecuting the church, you would not have seen any of this on the outside. So what might have been prodding Paul? We've talked about Stephen's death. Surely that made an impact. I mentioned his doubts, and we just don't know. We have some hints as you read through the Bible, but we don't know. We do know then that he was instantly converted to Christ on the road to Damascus. The conversion of Saul was huge. Maybe in this text you can identify with Saul, but you can identify with Ananias. Oh yeah, I can identify with that. I can do that. I can do that. Everybody in this room can make a difference in somebody's life. It might be that you'll make a difference in somebody's life that will make a bigger difference in lots of people's lives. You don't know. You don't know. You may be witnessing to somebody right now and you're discouraged. Because we're impatient. Look at Saul. Now, you would have given up on him. Would you not? God never did. God never did. When the time was right, God entered his life. And he willingly submitted. So keep praying. Keep inviting. And let's continue to create an environment that provides a warm welcome to people. You never know if somebody's going to walk in. I even talked to a guy recently Oh, he's probably 30. Here's the deal. He doesn't go to church and has never gone to church. I mean, look, I grew up in church. And I was like 30 years old, never went to church. Never. Ever been invited? No. Never been invited? Where are all the believers at? Surely you run into, surely I'm not the first one in 30 years. Yeah. And like every believer, even Paul quickly got connected to a local church. Because we all need support. We all need encouragement. We all need to be challenged, admonished. We all need to be taught. I mean, a local church is an incredible place. If everybody's doing his part, her part, it's a great place. The conversion of Saul. Second greatest event in the history of Christianity. Incredible. And the first believer he met, I hope you never forget, was a guy named Ananias. And all he did was give Paul a warm welcome, which, by the way, was very, very difficult, and he didn't want to do it. And that was easy. So I hope you'll remember the conversion of Saul. It was a turning point in his life, and today's message could be a turning point in your life if you'll take the text and apply it and ask God, what do you want me to do? Let's stand for prayer, shall we?